If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedmann.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is my dear friend, colleague, and mastermind buddy, Coach Jim Johnson. Jim is a legendary high school basketball coach with 428 victories, multiple Coach of the Year awards, and a knack for turning struggling teams into champions. After more than 30 years on the court, he now helps leaders, educators, and students learn how to win in life and work. He's the author of A Coach and a Miracle, Life Lessons from a Man Who Believed in an Autistic Boy. Jim's work gained global attention when JMAC, a student on the autism spectrum, stunned the world by scoring 20 points in the last 4 minutes of a game. His performance in 2006 captivated CBS, ESPN, CNN, and millions worldwide. Jim's experience helps audiences think bigger, lead better, and achieve their dreams. Jim, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show, and thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Well, thank you, Susan. We've developed a great friendship, and with that kind of introduction, I may bring you along for my speaking engagements because you did a really good job, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I feel I know you so well, and yet putting it into words, yes, because you're so accomplished, and obviously, your signature story with JMAC, and that's stunning the world. And this is where I wish we did this on video, because that video is sensational. And listeners, I know you can go to Jim's website, and Jim will give all that information later, and see that incredible victory, which I said, it stunned the world. And I'm not a basketball person, and yet I knew about this.
Yeah.
Jim, what you've done so brilliantly is to tie your book into speaking engagements. Talk to us about how that happened.
I was a little bit of the reverse. I know, listen to your podcast a lot, and I'm a fan of it. And I know you do a lot of work with nonfiction authors, and using their book to use in other ways, and speaking is a pretty obvious one. Well, because of the JMAC story, I got thrust into the speaking world right away before I had a book. So it's a little bit different than maybe some people as far as they use a book to then launch into speaking. But the one thing is, when I started to speak, and I had people reach out, and I co-authored the book, You Said, A Coach and a Miracle, with actually a high school friend that's a newspaper writer. One of the things we talked about is I was already doing a keynote called Dreams Really Do Come True. So I wanted to shape that book with some of the keys I talked about that. And so the first 6 chapters are really the keys that I talk about in my keynote. So there's something for your listeners to think about with their book is, depending on how long the book is and how many different directions, you could turn your book into multiple keynotes, or you could base it on one keynote, depending on the size of the book. But something to really think about, because the book can be a great asset as a speaker, as you always are great about talking about having bulk sales, where the fact that maybe everyone gets a book at the conference, or certainly at the end of your presentation, you could do the back end sale. And that's a great way to meet people afterwards, is by having a book and signing and get to know people.
Yeah, I mean, a book gives you so much credibility. And it's interesting that you did the reverse of what most authors do, because they have a book and then they say, oh, well, I'd like to get into speaking or coaching, training, because as you and I know, we don't get rich on selling books. However, the money-making pillars are definitely speaking, training, coaching, and consulting. Yes, I mean, that's the way to do it. So it's interesting that you did it the other way around, which
Right.
is fun. And I think you bring up a really good point is the fact that each one of your chapters could be a keynote presentation or a
Right.
workshop. Talk to us more about the speaking business, Jim, because I know that many authors, as much as they would like to be speakers in theory, there's sort of this scared, I want to
Right.
use a word, but I won't say it on the air, but they're scared out of their wits
You're right.
about getting on the platform and actually speaking. What are some tips that you might be able to share with our listeners about the speaking business or producing a speech?
Right. I think we've brought up a little bit about the studies that I saw one study where the fear of death was seventh and fear of speaking was number one. So it is a real fear for many people. And I got to say, when I started speaking, I certainly had fear. I mean, you get very nervous and you're trying to make an impact with your message. So one of the things I think I can help your audience with is I wanted to give back because I've been speaking now for almost 20 years. And so I do presentations, various adult groups, but also I do a lot for college students. I have what I call the SPEAK acronym, although I changed the K to a C. So it's SPEAC. And we can talk some about some of the things that I learned. But the one thing I really want to encourage the people listening is the fact that speaking, like anything else, is a skill. And with getting some knowledge and putting the reps in practice, you can be a really good speaker. I was not very good early, and now I feel like I'm pretty confident. But as you always know, you can always get better. But having some foundation in how to be a better speaker and then going out and then getting the reps is really important.
This aligns so well with your background. I mean, you talk about reps. I mean, all about any sport is it's practice, or like musicians. I mean, it's
Right.
all about practice, practice to get good. And there's never the ultimate. You're always practicing. I'm sure what Michael Jordans of this world, and
Right.
they practice like crazy. Talk to us about this practice. What does it take?
Being a longtime coach and now doing a lot of speaking is a great little statement I used to tell my players. Practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. One thing that's a key, and that's why I'll give you some tips to the audience about speaking, is you got to practice the right things. You got to understand the fundamentals of in our case, we're talking about speaking. I think it's really important that you get the reps in, but you get an understanding of practicing the right things to make you effective. So I'll start with the S of the SPEAK acronym, and that's how you start your presentation. And too many people that I've seen speak will come in and they'll kind of ramble the audience like, isn't it a beautiful day out, or those kinds of things. And people don't care that you got to capture their attention right away. So I have a few ideas. Number one is find a way to capture their attention. I have a global video. That's something I use often to capture attention. Video is something, but if it's a video that you are part of, I think that's the most powerful. Another way, because speaking is so important in storytelling, is start right with a story that'll be pertinent to your message. Another way is to just start with a question. And I combine that when I do one of my leadership presentations. After I show the JMAC video, I say, isn't that the essence of leadership when you shine the light on your team members, like the team members did for JMAC? Getting the audience to think about leadership that's a way by asking a question. And one more, and there's certainly other ways, but is having a startling statistic. For example, and I don't know the accuracy as I'm just making this up, but let's say you were talking about the ills of smoking and you start your presentation by saying, did you know that 80% of lung cancer is caused by smoking? Now, again, that's not an accurate fact. I should have looked that up. My point is get the audience attention right away. And a startling statistic is another way to do that.
Yeah, the sort of did you know, or just even starting off with the word imagine.
Yes.
Imagine that, obviously you can't beat the JMac and, story, and then obviously seeing the video. It brings you to tears because it is so sensational. And one of the things that you say here, shining the light on the team or the other person rather than looking to take all the kudos for yourself.
Right.
I think how important that is in anything that you do. I mean,
Right.
your audience, your customer, your client is the hero, as Don
Yep.
Miller in his story brand talks about.
Right.
Excellent. What's the P stand for?
So the P is preparation, and I also add PowerPoint. Preparation is how do you prepare for your presentation? And what I do is most of my presentations have a PowerPoint. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But with the PowerPoint, then I do bullet points for things that I want to say with the slides. And also, I want to put in stories that are going to capture the more important points that I want to make. And, being a more effective storyteller is certainly very important. But one of the things I encourage the listeners is to find stories that you're involved in that you can share with the audience, because the stories you're involved in make the most impact because you're emotionally involved. Now, it's not to say you can't use other stories, but I think that's a really important point is discover your stories. In fact, I have a story journal where I keep track of stories that I might be able to use in various presentations. And then practicing the preparation is I usually go through my presentation multiple times. But the other thing I also do is I always practice the opening and the close even more. And those are a little bit more memorized, where the other points or the other, the main body is more a bullet points, and I certainly practice it, but I don't memorize that, where the opening and the close is more, the words mean a lot. So I make sure that I got those pretty much verbatim. But those are some things you really want to do in getting preparation in doing that. And the last thing I'll say with the other P is PowerPoint, is the PowerPoint should enhance your presentation, not be your presentation. Let me give you a quick story. A few years ago, I was speaking to a construction company, and the CEO spoke before me. And I kid you not, Susan, he read every slide verbatim. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't be a better speaker than him. I'm in trouble. The PowerPoint should be a lot of pictures, just a few words, because you're there as the speaker to share the message, the PowerPoint. But I see too many people think that the PowerPoint's the message. No, you're the person sharing the message, and the PowerPoint should enhance because it's a visual piece that people can remember. But that's why the power of pictures on PowerPoints and fewer words, I think, is very significant. Another idea I learned from another speaker that I implemented just a couple of years ago is if you have a quote and it's kind of a long quote, break that up in segments because that'll keep the audience's attention. Like, for example, one of my favorite quotes is attitudes are contagious. So that's what I might share on the slide, and then pause. And then I'll say, is yours worth catchy? And then I pop it on, and that's the second piece. So that's another way to capture your audience attention with sharing a quote by breaking it up, especially if it's a little bit longer quote.
I love that one. I've not heard that one before, but it's perfect. And you're right, less is more. And it's not about reading the slides. The slides are just there. It's a picture.
Yeah.
And we're visual. For the most part, people are visual. They
Right.
remember pictures.
Yep.
And if you've got a story that you can attach to that picture, or a moral or a lesson, that's even more powerful. Just those 1, 2, 3 maximum bullet points, and not a sentence, just a phrase or even one word. It's just so that it helps make it more powerful. And
Right.
again, for memory's sake, we remember things in small chunks. I love that. And preparation. Yes, I read my presentations beforehand. I go through the slides and I talk through it to
Yeah.
myself. And for me, that works really well. I know other people are there with the stopwatch and everything. And no, I'm a little bit more free flowing.
Right.
However, I'm very cognizant of time. And obviously,
Yeah.
through practice, like all of us, we know, if we've got half an hour, we know when that half hour is about up.
Right. And that's where the preparation comes in. Because I will put a stopwatch like you do. I will go through with my PowerPoint and I practice. And sometimes I do it in front of a mirror, sometimes just in my office. But the big thing is getting a feel of how long it's going to take is important. And you're right, through reps, you're going to get that feel.
Yeah. It's all about practicing. I mean, you said this over and over again. Speaking, like any sport, is something that you have to practice
Yes,
because you can't just read a book about it. Well, you
right,
can read a book about it. There are tons of books on
right.
presentation skills. But the fact is, until you get up there and do it and do it and do it over and over again, that's when it starts becoming more sort of muscle memory, gets in cellular memory. That's helps make a good presentation. And you a good
Absolutely.
presenter.
Yeah. So
So the E, what does the
the
E
E
stand
is,
for?
again, is kind of a double edge. It's eye contact and engagement. And so I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Eye contact is that as you kind of peruse the room, and I've spoke, to small groups like 10, and I've spoke to groups over 1,000, so it's a little bit different. But the idea is to just gently kind of move and making sure that you're making eye contact with various people. The people that have smiles on their face, I think, are always nicer. You can make maybe a little bit longer eye contact. But the one caveat I give people is you're not a Martian. You don't want to look at somebody for like 45 seconds. He'll think you're crazy. You just want to comfortably look at people in the eyes for 5 to 6 seconds and then just kind of great. And it takes a little practice, but you're really thinking about, I'm talking to one person, even though you might be talking to 1,000 people. That's a key of the eye contact. And I know early on I didn't do a very good job. Now I'm very cognizant of making sure I'm looking at people's eyes. In fact, I've heard like, do you know the color of somebody's eyes? Those are just little tips that you can do as you're trying to make eye contact. Engagement. Well, there's a lot of ways to do engagement. I'll give you a couple ideas. One is just the power of the pause in giving, especially when you ask a rhetorical question, give a little time to have them embrace the question and think through a little bit. So using the power of the pause with questions. There's also many ways you can get the audience involved. I'll give you just 3 things to think about. One is just doing an individual activity quick. Like one of the things I'll do is in one of my presentations about goal setting, I'll say, in 45 seconds, I want you to write down your 3 most important goals. That's something you can just get every individual to do, get them to think. When you're doing engagement, one of the things, like I brand myself, obviously, as a coach, so I come on stage with a whistle. But the whistle also is a nice thing because I can start and stop any activities I do, and it's a pretty easy way to make a transition. So you do have to find ways when you have audience engagement, whether it's partner activities, group activities, or individual, is ways you can start and stop the audience. A partner activity could be like I do a bunch of different things with communication, with leadership. I have a couple different partner communication activities. That's another way you can do it, and flip. And again, having a way that you can do that partner exercise for 30 to 60 seconds and then flip flop. I also have in a couple of my presentations, a group activity where I get the whole group to go up, and it's one about team culture and trying to build that. So those are some of the things that you really got to think about as you speak, and especially the longer, because my keynotes usually are anywhere from 45 to 90 minutes. If they're 90 minutes, you got to get more audience participation. With 45, I still have some audience participation, but not quite as much. So, but those are things you want to think about with the engaging your audience.
And that takes real skill because you've got to be able to, it's like herding sheep sometimes,
Yes.
especially if you've got a large audience, because they all get excited, especially if they're talking together and then trying to bring them back to get
Yes.
some feedback. And it takes skill. It
Yeah.
does. For me, I love training programs. Give me 3 hours, 3 days rather
Right.
than 45 minutes or even
Yeah.
30 minutes. 30 minutes for me is like, oh my goodness. But then it's like, well, you don't cover everything. That's a mistake that I've made in the past, and
Yes,
maybe
that's a
you
good
have
point.
too, is that
Yeah.
try and give them as much information as you can in as short a period of time as possible. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
And that's exhausting.
Yes, it
That's
is.
exhausting for everybody.
Yeah.
because they're not taking anything in because it's just too much information. So
Right.
less is more. A, what does the A
So
stand
the A,
for?
I'm just going to say, because you hit the, less is more is a great point, is the agenda. And so when I talk about the agenda is really number one, and the other A is knowing your audience. And so that what do you want the audience to know at the end and be able to take action? Because obviously as a speaker, you want to entertain, but you want to also transform. You're trying to get people to make a choice to change their life for the positive. And so in doing that, a basic thing, I do break this rule sometime with some of my presentations, but is that if you can have three keys, but you mentioned like if it's 30 minutes, you may just have one key or two keys that you're really going to focus in because you had a great point. You don't want to jam so much content that you're speaking so fast. I got caught up early in my career. Well, I got to get everything in. So that means I just talk faster. No, that's not a good way because they won't comprehend what you're trying to do. So really understand how you're going to plan it. What are your keys that people, how can you help transfer their life? And then the other thing that I think is so important, I've said it before, being someone that's been an author of a book, this, is you got to become a good storyteller. So you should have really good stories that illustrate your points.
But that's one of my weaknesses, I have to admit. Listeners, you've heard it. I do admit that that's probably one of my biggest challenges is finding the right story too with
Yes.
a point.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one point in my life where I was doing presentation skills workshop and the trainer said, "You've all got stories." And I said, "No, I don't have any stories." And she was like, "Of course you do." And then all of a sudden I was like, "Of course I do." I've traveled the world. I've had experiences that have been airlifted up by the National Guard. I mean,
Right.
crazy stuff. Of
Yeah.
course I've got stories. We've all got stories. Some of them are more mind-blowing than others, but
Right.
we've all got stories.
Yeah.
Yes. The audience, I think that's so important. And I know listeners have heard that from me so many times, is your audience, knowing your audience, knowing who they are. What are their challenges? What's keeping them up at night? This is where some homework too before, and that's part of your preparation, I'm sure, Jim, is finding this out, not going in there cold and thinking,
Right.
I'm just going to give my presentation. Because the more that you make it about them, again, remembering that they're the heroes, the
Right.
more that they are going to love you as well, because it is about them. And that's what people are interested in. They come and listen, they're listening to this. It's like, what's in it for me? Why should I
Right.
take the time to listen to this? I'm always cognizant of that, or most of the time, I won't say always, but most of the
Right.
time, cognizant of that. And those takeaways, what do you want the audience to take away? And it might only just be one thing.
Exactly.
The C.
See,
Round us
so
up
I
with the
just,
C.
you had so many powerful things. I just want to share one thing because, I've had speakers ask for advice from me and they'll say, I don't have a signature story like the JMax story. And I said, you don't have to. Just start thinking about stories and capture them, put them in a journal so that you have stories that will illustrate your points. Because you had a great point. I mean, you've traveled the world. You got a lot of good stories, but people don't think they do. So that's a really important thing. And then the last thing I'll say before I talk about the C is knowing your audience. What I highly recommend if people, that are listening are getting into speaking, you should always do a pre-call. And in the pre-call, you're really trying to find out what is the message that the person that's bringing you in wants for their audience. So you're so right. And that's why it's so important to have a pre-call so that you got everything organized. And then the other thing I'll say about that is during the pre-call, this is something I learned later in my speaking career. I wish I had done it sooner, is also ask if you can get on a date on a calendar to do either a phone call or a Zoom call on a post call. Because I think that is so important where you can get feedback and stay connected. And that's really important. So that having that pre and post call. And going to the last thing, the C. The C is simply the close. It's so important because I was talking to a speaker the other day he was trying to sell, he wanted to do keynotes, but it's basically for his coaching and consulting, which some of the listeners may want to do some presentations, but the bottom line is they're making most of their revenue with coaching and consulting, which is fine. I'm mainly a keynote speaker, so I don't do as much with that. But whatever your business model is, to close, I'll share a couple ideas. One is that you should close with something that's compelling. I have a couple different stories that I close on my keynotes, and then a call to action, which you mentioned, to help them transfer them to life. I'll give you a quick illustration. When I close my dreams really do come true, I'll share with them that what I learned from JMac is the best way that you can make your dreams come true is to help others make their dreams come true. Your call to action is today, go out and find somebody you can help. That's just a little brief illustration of the close. And the other thing I talk about is Q&As. Often, in fact, I went to a conference a few years ago with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and some of the speakers were quite good, some were not so good. But the one thing the organizer, I thought, did a poor job is he let everyone have a Q&A as the last thing. And some of the people had a pretty good presentation, and then no one asked a question. They simply walked off the stage, so they didn't end with what I call a bang. So when I talked, going back to our pre-call, I asked them, do you want a Q&A? And many do. And I say, well, to have the most effectiveness with the Q&A is, one, I want to make sure I'm going to do it towards the end, but it's not going to be the last thing. I want to end with a compelling story and a call to action. Secondly, if it's a bigger group with a Q&A, make sure you have a microphone for the audience so that everybody can hear the question. Although I will give you one other bit of advice. In the Q&A, I think it's a really good idea, especially when it's a tricky question, is to repeat the question to the audience, because it gives you a little bit more time to think of what your answer is going to be. Those are just some ideas, but make sure the close is something that's memorable and compels them to take some action to transform their life.
Those are great points, by the way. And sometimes even getting people to explain what they want, because they ask the question in such a roundabout way that sometimes you're like, what are they trying to ask me?
Right.
I don't even know. I don't understand. But,
Yeah.
you don't want to belittle that so delicately. Well, what exactly do you mean by that? Or what exactly would you like to know? Because again, sometimes it's harder for people to verbalize what it is that they really want to know. They've got it in their head, but it doesn't always come out the right way when they actually say it. But that is, just ending with a bang and not just, oh, well, let it fizzle out.
Right.
Because again, you want to make an impact. Calls to action are often like, do you want to hire me?
Right.
Do you want me to be speaking at your event or at another event? Or, the more that you can do that. And what you said with that post call too is, how can you be of further assistance?
Right. Exactly. So,
and now I think even more, if you're a keynote speaker, can you offer maybe a breakout session as well to the
Yep.
show organizer? And you're doing it for the same amount of money, and they're getting more bang for their buck, which they also love. And that also gives you more opportunity to be exposed to the audience and getting them to love you. These are great points, Jim. Oh my goodness, we could go on for a long, long time, as you know. Jim, if our listeners want to get hold of you and find out more, and especially to watch that movie,
Yeah.
how
So
can they
I'll say
do that?
one last thing, is you had such great points, Susan, about the fact that I think, because I'm predominantly a keynote speaker, but I have developed breakout sessions, because at the big conferences, they often will ask the keynoter, and you're absolutely right. It's another way you can expose some of your content and get to meet people, because usually your breakouts are smaller than the keynote sessions. You're absolutely right on that. I share three things. I'm very open right now. My website is coachjimjohnson.com. We have a free newsletter. We do a free weekly blog. As you mentioned, I am part of a podcast called the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where we help young and emerging leaders. I also have a YouTube channel, both for the podcast and for myself. So those are both possibilities. And certainly if people are looking for inspiration. I brand myself as an inspirational leader. I do a lot of presentations around the country, and basically there are three things. I have an inspirational keynote, I have a leadership keynote, and I have a team culture, or how to build a championship team culture are the main things that I do. I do a few other things, and I have a few breakouts like goal setting and leadership. Those are the main things. My email is coachjimjohnson@gmail.com. I've opened up, Susan, so if anybody wants to contact me by text or phone, we do have a phone number, but that goes to my manager on the website. But my personal cell phone, if anybody wants to reach out, is 585-764-0220.
Wow, that's very generous, Jim. And daring.
Yeah.
You took a risk. I remember when I heard that for the first time when somebody gave their phone number out, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is an audience of 500 people.
Right.
Are you going to get 500 phone calls? And the interesting thing is that sometimes you might only get one or two, but that's okay.
Yes.
But it's still being willing to be open and helpful to people. And I know that that's something you're really good at. And having been a coach for over 30 years, you know all about coaching and what it takes to be successful as a team, not just you, it's the team that's successful. That's brilliant. And Jim, as you know, we always have our guests leave our listeners with a golden nugget. What's yours?
Because I'm an inspirational leader, Susan, I got to give a little inspiration. And so the inspiration is that I just want to challenge all the listeners that have written books that speaking is a really powerful way to continue to share your message. And you can do that. We gave you some nice tips. But the thing I'll encourage you is to, like anything else, writing a book is a challenge. Make speaking a study. As I started to learn more and more about this, I'm like, I may not be the best speaker in the world, but boy, I'm a lot better than I used to be because I've become a student of it. I've hired coaches. I've listened to a lot of different speeches, and then you pick up little things that you can add or subtract from your presentation. But the bottom line is you can do it. Be a student, be a learner, and go after it because it's a great way to share your message.
I love that. By the way, I think that might make a great book title. Make speaking a study.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yes, you absolutely have shared so beautifully the wisdom of speaking and how you've done it and how you've been successful and are successful at it. We're not talking in past tense. We're talking present and future, hopefully. Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure having you, and should have had you on a long time ago, but somehow this was the right time. Perfect. And listeners, if your book isn't selling the way you wanted or expected to, let's you and I jump on a quick call together to brainstorm ways to ramp up those sales, because you've invested a whole lot of time, money, and energy, and it's time you got the return you were hoping for. Go to bookmarketingbrainstorm.com to schedule your free call. And in the meantime, I hope this powerful interview sparks some ideas you can use to sell more books. Until next week, here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.